Limited ankle mobility is one of the biggest causes of poor form with squatting. But how can you fix it if the traditional methods like stretching, strengthening, and foam rolling don't work? Well, believe it or not, the answer might have little to do with your ankle and everything to do with your hip. We'll cover why that's often the case and what to do about it in today's video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Ankle mobility is simply your ability to move the ankle through a full range of motion. Now, in the context of most gym movements and even most athletic movements, we're usually talking about the ability to bend at the ankle or to move into ankle dorsiflexion. Now, you can measure this on your own by using a wall. To do this, you're going to get into a kneeling position with your foot about 5 inches from the wall. This is about roughly a fist's width away. Then you're going to bring your shin as far as you can over your foot without allowing your heel to lift up. As you do the test, you'll also keep your knee in a straight line with the middle part of your foot and make sure to keep both sides of the foot on the ground through the entire test. Now, if you can't touch your knee to the wall at 5 inches away, then you've likely got a limitation. Now, if this is you, elevating the heels can often help as a temporary fix. But long term, we want to improve how the ankle moves without heel elevation. And to do this, we need to first understand why traditional methods like stretching, strengthening, and foam rolling often fail. Most stretches and drills look at limited ankle mobility as an isolated issue at the ankle. But nothing in the body functions in isolation, and the reason is that the body is actually a chain of connected parts, just like an actual physical chain. And this means that yes, on the one hand, working on the ankle in isolation can sometimes help. But this is only going to help if the issue is in fact with the ankle. But for the same reason, a limitation at the hip or spine can cause limited movement at the ankle. And this is likely happening if you find that you're able to improve ankle range of motion in isolation, but then it never translates directly into movements like your squat. So to get changes that translate and stick long term, we must address the entire kinetic chain. And to understand how to do this, we'll explore the normal biomechanics of the squat. During squats, the ankle bends into dorsiflexion as we move down. This is going to occur by nature of the knee moving forward over the ankle. Now, at the same time, the hips move back into flexion or anterior tilt. This forward motion at the knee and backward motion at the hip helps us to maintain balance. And as these motions occur, the leg is going to move slightly towards internal rotation. This internal rotation movement occurs throughout the entire leg, including the shin or tibia. Tibial internal rotation allows the back of the foot to move relative to the front of the foot. And this motion within the foot is pronation, which allows the ankle to bend. So if you can't access internal rotation from the hip, it will disrupt normal motion at the foot and the ankle. Now, once you've connected these dots, you might wonder what limits internal rotation in a squat. And I'm afraid the answer isn't super simple. There are actually a few reasons. Now, the first and most obvious is a lack of movement into hip flexion or anterior tilt. Anterior tilt is what causes the leg bone to rotate into internal rotation in the context of a squat. But there are also a few less obvious reasons, and both of these involve excessive movement in the side-to-side or rotational planes. First, if your pelvis turns towards your leg as you descend, you'll take up that available internal rotation space earlier. Think of the pelvis and the leg as sharing the total amount of internal rotation. If the pelvis takes up too much by turning towards the leg, then there's not enough left over for the leg. In this case, the leg's going to stay too far out towards external rotation, and the foot will follow suit, staying too far towards supination. This supinated position prevents the foot from being able to change shape, and thus prevents the ankle from bending. Now, another similar cause is that the leg moves inwards too much or too fast. As I described in another video, this can cause a hip shift and is often a symptom of a lack of anterior pelvic tilt. And this does two unfavorable things. First of all, it takes up the available internal rotation space at the pelvis. And second, it causes the foot to collapse in as a unit, blocking the foot from being able to change shape. This prevents genuine foot pronation, a topic we can dive into in another video. So the solution here is to improve access to internal rotation by reverse engineering the problem. Now, we said that there were 3 common issues. The first was too little anterior tilt. And the second and third were too much abduction and internal rotation of the pelvis to the leg or the leg to the pelvis in these side-to-side or rotational planes. The hip external rotation and abduction makes room for internal rotation, both from a leg on pelvis and a pelvis on leg perspective. The anterior tilt allows a leg to access internal rotation exactly as it would in the context of a squat. So in the next section of the video, we're going to go through 4 step-by-step drills that you can use to improve access to these movements and get lasting changes in ankle mobility. If you've gotten value from this video so far, consider subscribing to the channel, like this video, or leave a comment below with a question. All these things help the algorithm to help me help more people. All right, so this first exercise is going to be a modified world's greatest stretch. And the reason that we're doing this is we're going to get the leg into a little bit of external rotation and abduction relative to the pelvis. And then we're going to be able to move into anterior tilt from a pelvis on leg perspective. And then we can even translate the entire leg over the foot to access that ankle mobility with the pelvis and the leg in a better position. So to start this, we're going to have the foot elevated on something like a bench. You'll choose something that kind of fits the height of your hip mobility. This is fine for me. From this position, the leg is going to be out towards a little bit of abduction and external rotation, pressure towards the outside part of the foot, and even just to start, we'll probably be slightly turned away in the spine and the pelvis. We're then going to take the hand of the same side. We're going to reach down towards the inside part of the foot, and we're going to notice that just by doing that, it's going to enhance that turn of the spine and pelvis away, and it's going to automatically bring that shin forward over the foot. So just by practicing this, we already get that feeling of opening from a leg on pelvis and pelvis on leg perspective, and then moving into that space with anterior tilt. Now there's really two ways that we can do this. We can either use this as a stretch or do this dynamically. So first the stretch. We'll reach down to the inside part of the foot. We're going to lean more weight on this side. We'll begin to get a little bit of stretch in the hip. It's going to be very common to sense this kind of in the upper hamstring, lower glute, inner thigh region. We can then hold that, just kind of sinking in, doing a nice breath in, little exhale, going a little bit further. And as we do this, we're automatically going to notice that the more weight that we put on this side and the more we reach down, the more we're going to open up and the more we're going to begin to get that knee to go over the foot. Now, the further we get the knee to go over the foot, we're going to sense a very subtle shift from outside to inside. And this is very much mimicking the exact mechanics that we're going to get in a squat, right? Legs are going to tend to be out, slightly in external rotation as we come down. Knee goes directly over the foot, pelvis goes back into anterior tilt, and so the carryover here is rather direct. Now to really get that dynamic aspect to this, we can then do this for reps. So reaching down, translating forward, and then coming back. And we'll notice a pressure shift from outside to inside and back to outside. Now if you're doing this and you sense a little bit too much compression here in the hip, then you might want to back off the initial amount of anterior tilt that you're using. So as you start here, you can allow the pelvis to tuck back. This will open up space to then move into that motion as you go and do the stretch. So little slight tuck back, this kind of a motion. Then from there, you'll have plenty of space to move into. Once again, reaching down just inside the foot, the hand of the same side, hip goes back, knee goes forward, pelvis and spine open, slight shift from outside to inside in the foot. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, this second exercise is a global pronation and supination drill, which is going to help us to work on these same mechanics that we established in the first exercise. Now, this particular exercise is one that I learned from Gary Ward via my buddy Jacob Grams. And you're going to see me during this exercise using this small wedge from Gary's company, Anatomy in Motion. And I love these small wedges because you can put them under the foot, and they're small enough to allow you to change the shape of the foot and influence the behavior of the entire kinetic chain from the ground up. Now, in this video, I'm not going to go through exactly why I'm using this, but if you want to understand how to use this in this exact context as well as others, then go ahead to the link in the description and grab a copy of Lower Body Foundations, where I go through a number of ways to use these wedges to improve biomechanics. So like I said, we're going to put the wedge under the base of the big toe here, and we're going to work on those same mechanics from exercise number 1. So as I turn the hips away, I'm going to allow the knee to travel over the foot, and then I'm going to return, allowing the hips to close down, and then getting that knee to come back. So in this initial position here with the hips closed, I'm actually biasing external rotation of the leg, supination of the foot, and closed chain internal rotation of the pelvis on the leg. Then that reverses. So I'm going to shift to the inside part of the foot. We're bending, moving towards pronation as I get closed chain hip external rotation above. So we have pronation globally and then supination. And we can either do this kind of behind the loaded leg to reduce demands in more of a kind of split squat kind of position, or we can get right up on the wedge and do this in a way that will translate more directly to the squat. Now, with that said, we can also have the feet pointing straight ahead, or we can slightly angle out and really simulate what would be a realistic amount of toe out in the squat. So once again, we can do this on one side, opening, allowing that knee to travel over the foot, slight shift from the outside to the inside, or we could even bring out both wedges and then just work on a squat, simulating those same mechanics. Now, one last little thing with this exercise specifically. We can do this like we're opening the whole body up, allowing the leg to go in one direction as we get the body to turn away. And that's gonna be great because in the context of a squat, we really get both legs going out as the body maintains this neutral position. But for the purposes of restoring motion that might help us alleviate asymmetry left to right, we can actually try to get some independence between what the ribcage and head are doing relative to the pelvis. So if we want to do that, we're going to allow that knee to travel over the foot as we turn, but instead of allowing the ribcage to turn with, we're going to keep that ribcage nice and square. So once again, knee comes over the foot, shift to the inside, hips open, but in this case, we're going to try to stay a little bit more square through the chest. Now, last thing here is that even if you have a limitation in ankle mobility on one side, I'd still recommend you do both, right? This drill goes through pronation and supination. So let's say you have a limitation in pronation on one side, it wouldn't be uncommon to have a slight limitation in supination on the other side. And if that's the case, you want to do both and you'll get slightly different effects from either side. All right, so exercise number 3 is one of my favorites. And this is where we're going to transition from working some of these mechanics on one side to now working them on both sides, and instead of in this unilateral, asymmetrical kind of way, I'm going to start to work these in a symmetrical kind of a way. So this is going to look just like a squat because it is a squat. And to do this, we're going to make sure that we select a nice comfortable stance. So the options are parallel with the feet or toed out, and narrow or wide. You want to find the combination that works best for you. For me, I like narrow with a slight bit of turnout. And what that allows is for my knees to go over the feet as the hips go back, the legs, once again, being out into slight external rotation and abduction, allows space for my pelvis to move into anterior tilt. So to do this, I'll grab something heavy, just a little bit below chest height. Then I'm going to set up in that comfortable stance, and I'm going to pull down, allowing knees to go over the feet as the pelvis moves into anterior tilt. I'll go only as low as I can without knocking knees in, turning the pelvis towards one side, or losing that anterior tilt. Then I'm going to keep that upward pressure and go up against it. So once again, pulling down, knees over feet, going into anterior tilt, only as low as we can without losing any of those positions, then pushing back up against that resistance. All right, so this last exercise is going to be a barbell pause squat. And you could do this with a back load, front load, kettlebell, dumbbell, body weight, whatever works for you. We're going to start out in a comfortable stance. So could be narrow, could be wide, could be straight ahead, could be toed out. For me, slightly narrow, like hip width, and slightly toed out works best. So you got to find what works for you. But once you're in that position, we're going to think about reinforcing those same mechanics. So we're going to allow the knees to travel over the feet as the hips go back. Now, as we do it, we're going to go as low as we can before sensing a limitation in the ankle. Hips back, knees going over the feet, going as low as we can before a limitation. So let's say I had a limitation here. I would just hold this position, get comfortable here, and gradually, rep by rep and session by session, I just go a little bit lower and a little bit lower. Now, as you're going through this, you might sense that limitation comes in at a certain point. And what I'd recommend you do is take a video of yourself from a few different angles and see what's happening. To assess for anterior pelvic tilt, you'll go from the side, squat down, and take a video from the left and the right and see if each is moving into the same degree of anterior pelvic tilt as you go down. If on one side you're not, you're going to go down to that position, try to get a little bit more anterior tilt, hold, and then gradually work yourself down. Now, the same thing is going to go for rotational or side-to-side movement at the pelvis. So if you come down and notice a knee knocks in, Try to do it again without allowing that motion. And the same is gonna go for hip rotation or shifting side to side. So make sure you keep even pressure, come down. If you notice a shift, only go to just before the shift, and then see if you can keep that weight distribution and go down a little further without the shift. All right, so I'm gonna put the entire program up at the end, but that's it for this video. If you wanna take this to the next level and improve your specific lower body biomechanics, then go ahead and check out my lower body foundations program. Inside, I cover all the isolation and integration activities that you need to move, feel, and perform your best. So go ahead and enroll at the link below in the description. As always, thanks a lot for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. And until next time, peace.